This is Tar Heel Talk, an in-depth look at the issues and people making news in North Carolina. Here's your host, Sonia Williams.
Women NC is an organization that raises awareness about a variety of issues affecting women around the world. Each year, Women NC awards scholarships, sponsorships, and mentoring for college students to do extensive research on issues relating to women. These fellows then attend the annual United Nations Commission on the Status of Women, or CSW, conference and share their research with others around the world. And joining me now to tell us more about Women NC and its work with college students is Alex Polk. Alex was a 2014 CSW Fellow and is now a co-chair for the group. Welcome to Tar Heel Talk.
I appreciate it. Thank you for having me.
Since its inception in about 2009, 2010, Women NC has been a powerful source of information, advocacy, talking points for women's issues, not just here in North Carolina, but from around the world. That really speaks to the organization's mission.
Yes, it does. Part of the foundation for Women NC as a nonprofit organization, non-governmental organization, is its focus on the local to global to local initiative for student research revolving around women's human rights. And what I mean when I say local to global, a lot of the students will research issues that affect us here in North Carolina, whether it's issues concerning women in the military or women in different STEM research fields, and they observe how it affects us in the Triangle and throughout North Carolina, and then they examine it on a larger scale internationally. And seeing the way it compares and the way that you can take steps to remedy both issues in a small scale and large scale is important for Women NC. And
you had the privilege of going to New York and participating in the United Nations conference a few years ago. Looking back on that experience and the work that you did at your research, what type of impact has that made on what your future plans are? You're a college senior now, looking toward a career.
Sure. So when I was a fellow, my focus was on women's access to education, specifically focused on women in the STEM fields, STEM being science, technology, engineering, mathematics. And now that I'm a senior, I've broadened my interest in education in general. I'm an international studies major, and so for my post-grad plans, I plan on going to the Peace Corps and working on education in the Ukraine. So I think by looking at women's experience with education as a main source of development, that's really helped me hone in my focus on my future in the educational sector.
Okay. Let's talk a little bit about the CSW Fellowship. That has been an opportunity to help mold leaders and to raise awareness about women's issues from around the world. Talk a little bit about the fellowship and how it's evolved over the years.
Sure. So the timeline for the CSW Fellowship, generally speaking, follows the standard academic calendar year. So since we are selecting undergraduate students, we do want to make sure we adhere to their schedule in that way. And so it begins around August when we release our application, and potential fellows send in their resumes and an essay describing their interest in women's human rights. And then selected finalists come in for a group interview. And once we narrow down the fellows that we selected, and this year we did pick 5, they attend a bunch of different workshops that help sort of develop their skills in leadership, advocacy, networking. This year we did evolve and change their program from just a standard research paper to a policy brief. So helping them develop policy and work on advocacy more specifically has been a big change for this year's fellowship.
And it's important to note that you are selecting from area colleges and universities.
Yes, ma'am.
So you're a student at NC State University, you have fellows from Meredith College, UNC Chapel Hill, Duke, and
UNC, NC State, Duke, and Meredith tend to be our top 4, but we do have applicants from other universities as well in the Triangle area.
Right. So it's a good opportunity for people who may be interested, and it doesn't have to be just female students, but people who are interested in women's issues or just gender equality, lots of issues that really impact us all are eligible to apply for the fellowship?
Absolutely. In the past, we've actually had a number of male fellows attend with us. They focus on everything from transgender rights to the role of men and boys in advocating for gender equality. And we've also had students in the past ranging from undergraduate to graduate level. This year we focused more on the undergraduate, but people who have a very widespread understanding of the women fight for women's human rights versus people who are just starting off and getting interested in the feminist movement. All of them are welcome to basically explore these different issues through their research.
And how can people find out more information about the fellowship and about Women in C?
Sure. So we do have a website that is in operation, and we've recently changed its formatting. So it's womeninc.org. And so that's a very good way to not only learn more about Women in C specifically and upcoming events that we have, but to really read the fellows' presentations. We have all of the past fellows' presentations and papers available online, so they can read their research and learn more that way as well.
Okay, excellent. We'll take a break. We'll talk more in just a minute.
Thank you.
We'll be back with more on Women in C after these messages. Today's show focuses on Women in C, an organization working to bring awareness to issues like gender equality that affect women around the world. And with us again is Alex Polk, CSW co-chair, and also joining us is Laura Douglas. Laura is a student at Meredith College and a 2016 CSW Fellow. Welcome to Tar Heel Talk.
Thank you so much for having me.
Now, Laura, you spent time in the Marine Corps as a military police officer. Talk a little bit about, well, before we do that, I want to talk about your research topic, because I think you can kind of connect the two based on your experience. Your research topic is sexual assault prevention education in hyper-masculine cultures.
Yes.
What does that mean?
So I used I focused mostly on producing an education platform to teach sexual assault prevention education. A lot of that includes bystander intervention, and that's something that's really focused on those hyper-masculine cultures. Now, that means that cultures that have a lot of men, so a frat house perhaps, or the military, or a varsity sports team in a college campus, this idea I have could apply to all of that. However, since I'm a United States Marine, I use that as my example when I was talking about who to show this education to.
And tell us a little bit about the education that you, or the research and the educational approach that you propose to take in addressing sexual assault prevention.
So I said that within the military, when I was active duty, every class that I went to and I attended on this, because it is mandatory training, and the amount of time this taught a year varies per branch, which is something else I focused on. Every class was very PC, and women would get up there and smile. These are combat.
And when you say PC, you mean politically correct.
Yes, politically correct. And these are combat hardened veterans. I served active duty in 2009, 2010. So it was the last ramp up of the Afghanistan war. And all of my friends had deployed, and for them to have anyone that teaches them something in a politically correct way, they're going to sort of turn off what they're listening to because it's a rough topic for them anyway. And so by addressing in a more aggressive sort of way and using the vernacular that these military members use with teaching, it's going to make them really become more aware and hear everything that's being said. So,
Alex, when you hear someone who has lived and experienced a military culture, a predominantly male-dominated field, speak about this issue, what type of impact does that have, do you think, for people who might be hearing that message?
I think it's an important message. I think it's one that's not touched on often enough when we talk about women's human rights. We tend to not think about hyper-masculine cultures like Laura described. So I think it is important to take it from that educational standpoint and really focus on bringing the concepts that we're dealing with in different spheres of the world and focusing them to the audience that you're tailoring them to the audience that you're dealing with. And Laura's research has been very new for Women in C, since we've not had a lot of people discuss military before. And so I think it's been fantastic that we've had the experience to observe research like this.
Right. How important is it, Laura, to have that sexual assault prevention education component in fields that you call hyper-masculine fields? How important is it to have that? Because sometimes when they are so male-dominated, it can be easily, the perception can be that we don't need it because it's really not an issue.
It is a huge issue within the military. So actually more men are sexually assaulted than women. So it is something that isn't really talked about, but it really does affect all of the troops in their own way. It's just women report more often. So to address this to a hyper-masculine field in terms of the military, since that's what I focused on, it affects all citizens of this country. For example, citizens pay for a healthy military that's going to have mission-capable Marines, sailors, service members. And if someone's sexually assaulted and has the resulting mental health issues that come with that, then they are labeled mission incomplete. So they are not able to be deployed to the front lines and be utilized in their job in the most proper way. So you, Sonia, are paying for someone to get a paycheck and just to get mental health treatment for something that could have been preventable. And then on top of that, that service member gets out of the military, and then they have to go to the VA, and that's even more resources that are being pulled out of these taxpayers' money. So it really doesn't just affect the woman. That is often what's argued when this is brought up, especially in the veteran groups that I've been associated myself with in the past. So it's really important to recognize that it affects everyone. And that's why I always bring up those couple of points.
Excellent, excellent point. As you share your research with people, you shared in New York, now with people here in North Carolina in the Triangle on April 7th, what is one point that you hope they take away from your message?
I just hope that they understand it's happening, because there's a lot of focus on other groups and, that this happens to. And for, I'm a United States Marine, so that makes it hit home with me. And people don't, I've talked to people on airplanes and, people I pass by and explain that I was doing this research and I had this great opportunity with Women NC and explained to them what I was doing. And many have no idea that this is even an issue. And there's been legislation on the federal level that's been put forth to try to combat this to an extent, and some of the other issues that come with it in terms of the commands and how they handle these sexual assaults. And the struggle is that they are fought against and not enough people and constituents know what's happening. So if they can know that this is an issue and then contact whoever represents them, whether on the state level or the federal level, and then I will feel like I've done my job. If one person can have this not happen to them, then it was a success.
Absolutely. And Alex, this is really what Women in C and the CSW Fellowship is all about. It's raising awareness about issues that people a lot of times aren't talking about.
Absolutely. Raising awareness, raising people's voices, and helping people to advocate, whether or not that means doing more research or calling their legislative representatives. It's all what Women in C focuses on in many of its different facets, from CSW to its other advocacy missions as well.
Okay. Laura Douglas, we thank you so much, first and foremost, for your service.
Thank you.
And thank you for the research that you're doing, and best of luck in sharing that on April 7th. And thank you for being with us today.
Thank you again for having me.
All right. Up next, the status of women in politics. We'll take a look at this issue when Tar Heel Talk continues. Welcome back to Tar Heel Talk. I'm Sonia Williams. Women in C is an organization working to bring awareness to issues like gender equality and social justice and a number of other matters affecting women around the world. And with us again is Alex Polk, Commission on the Status of Women co-chair for the fellowship program for Women in C, and also joining us is Maya Krishnan. Maya is a senior at NC State University, double majoring in business administration and international studies with a concentration in global sustainability and development. That's a mouthful. and a lot going on. You're also a 2016 CSW fellow, and the topic of your research was improving the pipeline to political leadership positions for minority women, which is quite fitting for this time. We're in the midst of campaigning. It could very well have a female Democratic candidate for president, also had a Republican candidate running. So women and politics front and center.
That's right.
Right now. Talk a little bit about your research.
Sure. I was really interested in the beginning in women in leadership positions, and that took me straight to politics because there's so much power concentrated in that realm. And especially when these people are having direct impacts on policy that impacts everyone. So it's really important to have women's voices represented in that. And when I look at North Carolina in specific and a lot of other states, minority women's voices, when you look at other demographic things and things like ethnic minorities, and that's just not represented even more. So where there may be 27% of political office, we have about 5,000 different positions all across the state at different levels of leadership. 27 occupied by women, but only 2.2% occupied by women of color. So that's a really huge disparity.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think you did some research on women in rural areas and being involved in politics as well, or the lack thereof, and maybe some of the barriers that they face.
Yeah, that definitely played a role because I think the more different identities you look at, sometimes the worse it gets. So in rural areas, there are even fewer women in some of these political leadership roles and even fewer women of color. And especially at these local levels, that's really important to have women's voices heard in political leadership.
And when you talk about women having a voice in politics, policies being shaped every day, controversial House Bill 2, which is now law, so it's important to have a representation of the community in which you live in a position to make those decisions. Talk a little bit about the importance of advocacy and having that group to share that information and make your voices heard.
I think diversity of voice within these leadership roles is so important. And it's just because at the very basic level, how can you know some different experiences if you don't have someone representing that? And it can be something really simple. It can be something like, at this time of day, it's really hard for women to make a meeting to talk about, that has impact on policy, like having their voices be heard in the political decision-making process. And it can be much bigger than that at worst. And so when you have that diversity, you have a much better chance of making sure that you're covering all your bases and that the people who these policies are impacting are going to be taken care of.
How does North Carolina fare when it comes to women in political positions?
It depends. For example, in our executive office, we're doing pretty well. And in southern United States, we're doing better. But in the grand scheme of things in the United States, we're not doing so well. And especially in comparison to other countries in the world, that was what I was learning at the UN. And it's interesting to me because these barriers that are keeping women and women of color from getting into these leadership roles, they transcend geographic boundaries. But a lot of other countries are doing so many different things to try and address that and really increase the voices of women in these positions.
What are some of the things that are being done to try to break down those barriers, or being done successfully in other countries that maybe we can learn from here?
Well, I think one thing is really the role of other external organizations, civil society, NGOs, nonprofits, really making sure that women are having access to some of these resources and leadership trainings, public speaking trainings. And in North Carolina, I was working with a partner organization over the course of this research, Lillian's List, and they're providing some of these trainings. They're providing resources and funding. And I can't speak enough about how much that does to support women who are pursuing these roles.
And Alex, when you listen to Maya and all of the wonderful research she's done, our viewers will have an opportunity to meet her and the other fellows on April 7th. Tell us about the upcoming symposium and what our viewers can expect.
Absolutely. So on April 7th, that is next Thursday, the fellows who have just recently returned from their trip to the United Nations Commission on Status of Women are coming back to do a reflection symposium piece. And basically they'll be highlighting a lot of key points that they've discovered in their research, but they'll also be discussing what they've learned from the United Nations itself. So you'll be able to hear more of their points, such as anything that Maya and Laura have talked about women's rights, whether it's in the military and hypermasculine cultures or through political pipelines, as well as things that they took away from their trip to New York.
And that is, again, April 7th, and it's from 7 to 8:30 p.m., and it's at the Freeman Center for Jewish Life at Duke University on their campus. And people can find out more information about this event and how to RSVP for it by going to womennc.org, and certainly find a wealth of information about your organization as well as the fellowships, because you're now having the fellowships every year, which has been wonderful, and you've been able to help support several college students. Talk a little bit about the number of students you've been able to support, or CSW has been able to support, and the impact that that's making.
Absolutely. So a lot of, we've had about 30 fellows probably over the course of Women in C's CSW fellowship program. Typically we have about 5 to 7 fellows per year. And just seeing the way previous fellows have grown, whether it's with Women in C, a lot of fellows do come back and work as a board member or as a mentor with our mentor-mentee program, and others have gone on to do a wealth of different activities that affect us locally as well as globally. I know that we've had some fellows go on to work with IBM, some fellows have gone on to work with the Peace Corps, and a lot of people have continued starting with their research here with Women in C to exploring that in their future careers. And I think the development through the workshops like the leadership and advocacy training has really helped promote everyone and propel them and push them for their future.
Having been on both sides, being a fellow in 2014 and now being the co-chair of the CSW Fellows Program, what has been something that you value in your experience and that you think you'll take with you once you start your career?
I think the connections that I've made with different members of Women in C have been the biggest takeaway. One of the people that worked on the committee with me, Isabella Higgins, was also a fellow my year, and so we've been friends since we met in 2013 and 2014, and just watching each other grow and helping each other work through different things, Women in C and otherwise, has been excellent. So I think the camaraderie has been a great takeaway, not only for a professional development standpoint, but just a personal growth standpoint as well.
And Maya, I understand that during your trip to New York this year, you were able to meet some very famous people who are involved in women's advocacy. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, very famous in the world of women's advocacy. I got to meet the executive director of UN Women. I'm going to say her name. I hope I'm doing it justice, but it's Phumzile Mlambo Ngqa, and she's a fantastic human being from what I understand of her. She's been leading the organization in such a strong direction, and she'd been speaking at event after event that I had been going to in the UN. And her wealth of knowledge, amazing. So getting to see her at the end of the week, take a picture with her, and at least thank her for everything she's doing, that was a really great experience.
I think a valuable experience, I think, that you'll help to make a difference in the world, both of you. And we thank you and Laura as well for being our guest today. And we wish you the very best of luck on April 7th. People can find out more information by going to womennc.org. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Appreciate it.
That's it for this week's Tar Heel Talk. To comment on this or other episodes of the show, send us a message on our Facebook page or an email to tarheeltalk@fox50.com. I'm Sonia Williams. Thanks so much for watching. Enjoy your week.